Welcome, NIRSA. My name is Dr. Wendy Windsor. I am the current director of campus recreation at Tulane University and also serving as your NIRSA president. I am pleased to have two distinguished panelists join me today for episode 3 of Hidden Talents of NIRSA. Today, we'll really be focusing on resiliency and what that means in terms of some of the challenges and obstacles we've overcome. We all have a similar but very different experience that we're going to share with each of you today. All of us have a disability that we're going to talk about and really kind of share our experience in regards to how we've been able to overcome that disability as we have navigated our professional careers. So before we really get started, I'm going to ask my two panelists to introduce themselves, and then we will go into some conversation. This episode would also be a little bit unique because I will be sharing my story as well. With that being said, we'll go ahead and get started. And Daniel, I'll start with you.
Hi, everyone. I'm David Grassi. He, him, his. I'm currently the membership coordinator at Washington State University in Pullman.
Hey all, my name's Allie, Bogard. My pronouns are they, them, and I currently serve as the assistant director of sport clubs at Colorado State University.
Great, thank you both. So I'm gonna just jump right in, and I'm curious if you could share your disability with the group and really kind of talk about why you decided that it was important for you to share your story today.
Yeah, so I can jump in. So I was born with my disability at birth, spina bifida, which is one of the most common physical birth defects actually in the United States. And I think it's very important that you actually get that out there. What disability, because sometimes people like to hide their disability. Obviously mine's very visible. I'm currently in a wheelchair, basically 24/7, but sharing my story, showing actually that even though you have a physical disability, you can still do everything that someone else who is completely able-bodied can do.
Great, thank you, David. And I'm actually going to jump in because you mentioned how some individuals like to hide their disability, and I am guilty as charged, and that is really why I first wanted to do this episode, but also wanted to take the time to share. I think my mom would say that I was extremely stubborn growing up, and even early into my career, I do have a visual disability. A very rare eye condition. It is more of the optic nerve of my eye, and so it is uncorrectable, which makes it even more of a challenge. But to the average person, you will not know. People that I have been actually even really close friends with, high school, college, I was very good at hiding the fact that I could not see. And we'll get to why that presented a lot of challenges later on in the episode. But I wanted to really hopefully provide insight to people in why it is important not to hide who you are, and to be willing to share, because I'm sure that there are other individuals out there that have had similar issues like me, right? And I just want to get that word out. So, yeah. Allie, we'll turn it over to you.
Right. Similarly, my disability is also hidden. I have ADHD and wasn't diagnosed with that until within the last few years or so. I think looking back, there's definitely a lot of obvious signs that well on and early in my life. So I think for me, particularly talking about that and sharing my experience there, just because there is a lack of awareness around that, and I think still a stigma of only young boys have ADHD because they can't sit still and can't pay attention. that isn't the case. And a lot of folks, particularly like in their late 20s, early 30s, and in my generation, I think are really starting to navigate and become aware of some of that. Yeah, and I think honestly, like currently trying to navigate and figure out like added layer there of like autism and what that looks like, and talking about some of that with my therapist as well. So and those things often go hand in hand frequently. So yeah, I think going back to what you both had shared of wanting to just share my experience and bring awareness to what that looks like.
Yeah. And I think for me, it's also important just to let people know that it's okay. Like I always thought, I guess I had a fear of being seen as someone that was different, and I think that's why I chose to hide the fact that I couldn't see. And I look back on that, and I was like, all the opportunities just for help and assistance that my stubbornness, right, allowed me to just make things so much more difficult than what they had to be. If I just got over that fear, right? I was like, I'm just like everyone else. I don't want to be treated any different. And so that's why I chose to make that decision to keep it hidden. But thank you both for sharing your why here. So my next question is, what has been at least one thing that has been difficult or challenging to navigate? And if you're obliged to, like, how have you been able to overcome that challenge? So what's been something that has been hard for you to navigate, especially within your career, and how have you overcome it?
I'll start with me. It's a little bit more obvious. Someone sees me and they're like, oh, you have a disability right away. And because of media and all of that, people think if you use a wheelchair, you have another disability. You might have a learning disability. You might not be able to do certain things. So just right off the bat, I feel like I'm always at a disadvantage, and I always have to somehow get back to, I guess, quote, what a normal person would start at. So kind of being at the very beginning and kind of breaking down those barriers of, no, it's just, I use wheels to get around instead of my feet. Like, that's the only difference. I have nothing else. And I think that's very difficult for some people to grasp. And I think it's big because of the media and everything, that they don't know. It's not out there with all that education and everything like that. But since I was born with my disability, I've gotten used to, how do I advocate for myself? What do I need to say? And unfortunately, I feel like the burden is a lot on me, on educating people about that. And but at least I'm educating them, and after that interaction, we get to move forward, and hopefully they learn something for that next time they interact with someone. So that's definitely probably the most difficult thing for me, I would say.
And so, David, when you think about, just being resilient during all of this, like, how would you define resiliency, and what does that mean to you?
Yeah, so like I kind of mentioned, advocating for yourself, always just going in with an open mind on, not everyone knows like maybe your background or your story. So advocating, kind of educating, and always keep trying. Even if you've repeated yourself 1,000 times, keep saying it, because if you don't, no one else is going to advocate for you. So always have to keep going. And I've definitely learned that for a while. And some of the conversations wear down on me, but I'm like, I'm doing this for the greater good and not just for myself.
Great, awesome, thank you. And I think for me, it was the advocacy, but it was more just learning how to ask for help, right? And I know I talked about it a little bit earlier, but I just saw that as a sign of weakness. And I can't even share with the two of you how many times I tried to figure out something on my own, right? Or I tried to navigate a situation on my own. And, I put myself in some situations that were probably situations that could have easily been avoided if if I just would ask for help. And one story that I'm going to share, because it's NIRSA related, and I think it's a pretty powerful story. So I want to make sure that I take this moment to talk about this. So it's a lot to do with the transition, and I know I asked about how you navigated through your career. And so as a very young professional, this is when I first got engaged in NIRSA. And this was back in the day when at the regional conference, we would do elections for the member rep actually on site during the national conference, but in our regional meeting. And I was on nominations and appointments at the time, and I was asked to lead the vote and the voting procedures, I should say. And I knew that would require me to get up on stage and read basically the script, right? Announcing who the two finalists were, and just walking everyone through the election process. Instead of saying, hey, we may want to have someone else do this, because I'm going to have a challenge reading, right, the materials, because if you remember, I said it was hidden, right? I didn't want people to know. And so I would often, when I read, try to pull the paper back as far as I could, because of course, if I have it close up, that would be an indicator that, hey, something's wrong. So I get up on the stage, trying to hold the paper back as far as I could not see anything, right? And instead of admitting that I had a visual impairment and that I needed to hold it, I tried to get through it. And it was a disaster. I mean, I really, to this day, it was probably, in my mind, my most embarrassing NIRSA moment. It did prevent me from ever wanting to get back up on a stage, especially at a NIRSA event. It did hinder me from wanting to volunteer again. I mean, it was that dramatic, to the point where when people would ask me, hey, it's your time, are you going to serve for NIRSA president? I decided, for years, that because this visual impairment that I have is so difficult to navigate, that I didn't want to. And then, I matured, things changed, and I finally realized that, hey, you can't let this keep you from doing, what you're called to do. And so I decided to go ahead and put my name in the hat. I got elected, and I will say that last year at the end of the annual conference, when I had to go back up on the NIRSA stage and do the closing, that was my first time on the big stage since that event that happened almost 10 years ago, if not longer than that. And I was fearful. Yeah, I guess PHSD, I didn't want to get up there and freak out, but I got up there and I was able to pull it together, and I did well, and I overcame that fear, right? But it was definitely a challenge for me to be able to navigate that. And it's just amazing to see where I was back then and where I am today. And I hope that story inspires others to be able to just step out and be resilient and bounce back when you have difficult situations. So cool. All right, so Allie, we're gonna turn to you. How does your own experiences with your disability inform your work and the decisions that you have to make?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Working with sport clubs, especially, I think it's in some ways always been on my mind that the way I communicate things, both in like written format or trainings and verbal format, should be inclusive and accessible. I think I started probably thinking about those things a little bit more intentionally when I started thinking about the ways that my ADHD impacts the way that I learn or am able to retain information. So for me, I think that informs my work a lot with the sport club level of the ways I work with students, especially being honest about my disability and like the conversations we get to have for folks who also share that same disability for navigating through things. I think the other way that shows up consistently for me is really and like the conversation around like workplace culture and like the flexibility piece and remote work. So I have definitely, I'm kind of getting a little bit into next question, but for me, noticed a lot about the ways I need to work and need the support that I need, like from my supervisor and the folks that I supervise. And I think the ways that the culture has been in higher ed in the past really embraces like toxic positivity and toxic productivity. And for someone who's neurodivergent, those things do not line up at all. When I was thinking about this, we set a couple of like core agreements during a staff retreat recently. But I think these ones stick out the most to me and inform my work the most. And I think so much of navigating the neurodivergent world in higher ed is particularly relates to like some of these few things. But one is to encourage balance. I will prioritize my well-being without feeling guilty. To encourage balance, I will not uphold toxic productivity or other systemic tools of the grind culture. Especially like the grind culture is so ableist. And I think that's probably something that absolutely drives me nuts about like working in higher ed, and particularly, and I think still even some of that culture that exists in campus rec departments across the country and in Canada beyond, that many folks are doing some good work around, but a lot of unlearning still. The other one on here being to encourage balance, I will support others' balance without the need for an explanation. So I think those things really hit for me when I think about my work and the decisions I make and how my disability informs that in a roundabout way.
Oh, good. Wow. That's some good information there. Thank you for sharing that. David, you have anything to add?
Yes, so I'm more obviously physical with things like that. I also come from the facility / membership side of things with campus recreation. And what I'm always looking for is universal design. Like, why do a lot of facilities not have that? Like, facility I'm currently at, we have turnstiles to get in the building, and then we have a small gate that's not ADA accessible. So once you even open the doors, you can't even get in our facility. So it's like, oh, you have to go through our exit gate to get in. And I'm like, that's not cool, because then that singles that person out. And so that's what I'm always thinking of is like, why don't we have ramps everywhere? Why do we always have to have steps? Or you have an elevator, but sometimes to get to the elevator, you have to go through this back hallway to go to the freight elevator because they don't have one. So just like normal things like that. One thing that sticks out to me, I believe we were in Boston at the annual conference, and we were at a social, I think at a bowling alley, and I couldn't go through the front door. I had to go back around, and one of the workers had to meet me there, but forgot about me. So I was outside for about 15 to 20 minutes, just waiting for someone to open the door for me to actually go in and meet everyone else. And I'm like, why? Like, just why? It doesn't make any sense to me. So that's what I'm always thinking about. Just normal, like, why can't you just let everyone go the same way or like do something? So a lot of times I'm flabbergasted with everything, but that's what always comes to mind for my day-to-day operations.
Yeah, and I think it goes back, right, to, that fear that I said I had, the fear of being singled out, or the fear of being treated different, and that does hinder a lot of us from wanting to put ourselves out there. And so I appreciate you sharing that, because it does really just put on display maybe why sometimes those of us that have, you know, either visible or hidden disabilities are afraid to step out, you know, and put ourselves out there. So appreciate that. All right, so my last question before we go into, well, maybe I have two more. So let's just go with this. Have you ever asked for reasonable accommodations at work? And if so, what was that process like for you? And Allie, we'll start with you there.
Cool. I yes and no, and I think currently, and really didn't touch on this in the way this informs my work answer. But I work remote on Wednesdays and I don't have any meetings, and I've started to learn that while I am a people person, I'm such an empath also, and the way my brain works, on top of that, I get exhausted by working around and with people every day. And can't do anything for myself when I get home at the end of the day because I am so exhausted from like masking all day and also like the interactions with folks. So that has started to be, I think, I mean, I'm on my 8th year as a professional, so I think trial and error every single semester for me of not getting to a place of burnout. So that started to work a little bit. I think needing the flexibility to work nights and weekends, and as a sport club person and in general at the level I'm at, that's super easy and doable. I think there are times where I probably question like moving up or even also like out of higher ed, because if I don't have that flexible and adaptable work environment, I don't think I can be successful. And I think a lot of that is work culture related, but again, so much of that still is ableist, like, oh, you need to be at this desk from 8 to 5 and this is what you need to be doing every single day, like all of that, right? So I think there's a fear for me of like, can I ever actually like be in a role as a director, because people do exhaust me so much, and like needing the space that I need, and also like the flexible work environment, and maybe, who knows, things will eventually change. But I'm sure for some people the way I work would be absolutely no way. Hands in the air. I know people in like NIRSA who would be like, what do you mean you get to do that? What do you mean you went 2 weeks to Utah recently to like take care of yourself and work remote for a few days? Like, no way could you be gone for two weeks in higher ed serving students. And I think that's wrong, and I think that's bullshit, honestly. And I think some of that there comes from me of when I started as a professional, was starting to figure some of this out, and frequently would spend time working on like the weekend, like on a Sunday or something, to prepare for my week and catch up on email, especially for folks with ADHD. Like hyper focus is a real thing for me, so like there will be times where I sit down and do nothing but work for like 12 hours, and I'm like, holy shit, I haven't eaten. Or we'll work until like start working at like 8 p.m. and like not finish working until 4 a.m. sometimes, because that's when my body's like, oh, you have the energy to do work and you need to do these things right now. And usually it's definitely based on I work well under pressure, so like needing the pressure to get things done and procrastinating for sure sometimes is definitely tied to that. But in my first year as a professional, started to recognize those things. There were some other things that were happening, and was totally blindsided by my supervisor and someone who worked in HR, and very much in an attempt to like manipulate like what I needed, and was told that I shouldn't be coming in to work on nights and weekends. Also was like intramural sport club professional at this time, and we were building a student rec center, so it was like coming to student government meetings regularly because I was advising that group. So I was told to like stop going to those things, like basically told what I should do with my work and where I needed to invest my time and what I needed to give up, rather than what accommodations actually looked like. And then also this like, oh, you need to work in a quiet space. Well, like you can go work in the library and then you can email the director and like tell him when you're going to work in the library and what time you're going to work over there. And I'm like, cool, so I need to pull up my laptop and like tell you that I can't focus right now. And so I'm like going to a different place on campus to focus. Like that's really sustainable. So that was my experience and felt very much like blindsided, and that HR actually didn't have my best interest in mind as an employee, and wanted to force what they thought were reasonable accommodations onto me that weren't actually reasonable, and didn't have an opportunity really to advocate for myself or know what my needs were, especially as a young pro. So honestly, I think I hold probably a decent amount of like trauma around that experience, and because of that, haven't really like gone and asked for like official reasonable accommodations ever because of that experience. And in the last two like places of work, I've really just had those conversations directly with my supervisor.
Yeah, I hate hearing that, but I definitely appreciate you sharing and being honest, about your experiences. And I think, well, let me just say this. I hope that others are really listening, right, to your story and hearing your message and what you have to say, because you're right. I think things are definitely different now, and the more that individuals like yourself, right, can share, and the more that we can hear and adapt and adjust to be able to provide reasonable accommodations for those individuals that truly do need them, is definitely hopefully a benefit of this recording today. So thank you again. I'll briefly just share that it took me up into probably about 8 or 9 years ago, and I've been in the field now for 20 plus years, to ask for accommodations. And it wasn't by choice. I actually had a supervisor who really kind of forced my hand. And to this day, I think that was probably the best decision. I mean, we had an honest conversation, and she was like, look, you've got as far as you can get on your own. And if you do decide to ever move up, right? So once again, I'm at this point where I'm going to decide, do I want to be a director? Do I want to further my career? She's like, you're going to have to get help. And so after I had that conversation with her, and she put me in contact with some individuals, it was amazing. It was amazing the type of support that I was provided, and how easier things became for me in order to navigate just day to day, my day to day. I mean, just how I'm able to send emails now and just really kind of navigate the workplace. I do owe a lot to this individual, because if not, I don't know if I would be sitting in the seat right now. So, I think we've all had our unique journeys to get to where we are. Daniel, did you have any? I mean, Mama, I just got off another podcast with the Daniel, so I apologize. David, do you have anything else you would like to add?
Not really. I just know I've never asked for reasonable accommodation myself, so I don't know that whole process. But I just know the stigma around I need to ask. And me personally, at my university, that's why I started our disabled faculty and staff affinities, or disabled faculty and staff allies plus affinities group, where we can, as a university, help other individuals navigate that HR process, because it is like you get thrown around to 8 different people because they don't know the question. They're just going to pawn you off on someone else. So even though I haven't done that process, I started a affinity group at WSU to help other individuals, because it is a daunting process.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I actually may mention that to our office here, because I love that concept. So anything else, any last words of wisdom before we go to our rapid round that either one of you would like to share? No. Awesome. Great. Well, this is just an opportunity very quickly for our listeners to get to know the two of you just a tad bit better. And so this is always my favorite section of rapid questions. So of course, we're gonna stick with the theme, hidden talents of NIRSA. Would you be able to share with us any hidden talent or hobby or skill set that you have that many of us probably don't know?
I can totally go first. Two things I think come to, well, a few things come to mind. For sure, probably writing. I had a chapter I wrote for a book was published, and shares like my coming out story and how that has impacted me both like growing up with the faith background and things, and of course it's evolved over time. But the other probably baking, pretty good baker. And the last one would be I know a lot of like random facts or am pretty into like rocks and crystals. So like pretty early on was like a middle school science major, and was interested in like being a geology minor. And because of a professor, and I'm still in touch with this professor today, but for sure have always been interested in rocks, and he like piqued my interest, and then that like went down a whole rabbit hole, you know, like when I moved out west, naturally, as one does when they move out west. So those would probably be my three probably hidden talents, hobbies, or skills, interests.
Good, thank you. David?
Yeah, for me, I'm a big adapted athlete. So growing up, I did adaptive sports, whatever I could do. My parents threw me in just like a normal kid. And luckily, I did wheelchair track and wheelchair basketball at the collegiate level. And now I currently am playing adult basketball. I just got back from a tournament in Portland over the weekend. Got back early this morning, late last night. So still enjoying it and loving it. So
Awesome.
I guess pretty hidden, but that's
Yeah.
what I enjoy.
Ah, nice. No, very good. Very good. All right, biggest accomplishment. And David, we'll start with you.
For me, I have a lot of to pick one, but I think the biggest one was when I completed the Boston Marathon for the first time. Because that's when you think of marathons, that's like the big marathon that everyone thinks of. And completing that, it was one of my dreams as a kid growing up, and I actually got to do it. And it was, I wouldn't say it was awesome while I was doing it, but once I crossed that finish line, it was so much fun, and getting that medal and everything was awesome.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You know, I'd probably have to say, going back to the writing hidden talent, probably writing, sharing my story and in such a public way. And that being like right after I had moved away from home being Kentucky. And I think just like in general, building a life for myself that is in some ways the same, but also different than the norms and values in which I was raised. Yeah.
Awesome. Good. Thank you. All right, staying with you, Allie. Most prized possession.
Oh, my dog. Easy answer. Don't even have to think twice. Molly. Yep.
For me, I would have to say both my undergrad and my master's degrees. Growing up with a physical disability, you're always told you can't do that, and actually getting those was probably one of the most difficult things I've ever done. And now I can say no one can ever take that away from me, and that's definitely the two biggest things. I guess it's one, but definitely those for sure.
Yeah, David, I'll have to echo you because it is, people ask me all the time, so what led you to get your doctorate, you know? And I say, the doctor that told me at the age of 10 that I would have a hard time, you know, let alone in high school, thinking about even going to college and getting my college degrees. And I made a decision at 10 that, you know what, I'm going to prove you wrong. And yeah, So I definitely echo those sentiments there. By far my most prized possession, because I did it for me, but I also did it to prove people wrong too. So, all right, last question. Best NIRSA moment or experience?
Am I first or is David first?
Go for it. Yep.
Okay, I'll go first. Probably my first NIRSA Vegas 2013. Went to Mix Suites after the honor award banquet for Tom's honor award reception, and I met Kevin Marbury, my mentor, now mentor, I should say. And I'm gonna get emotional, so I'll take a second. More or less like shared a vision for creating an undergrad internship program similar to UCLA's grad internship that is really more or less a graduate internship. Let's be real. So Kevin, like, yeah, believed in me as a student and followed up over email after that conference, like my Aunt Darcy taught me to do. And birthed the Oregon internship that summer. So
I did not know the history of that. So
Yep.
wow. Yeah. Awesome.
So probably my best NIRSA moment, mostly I think also because I had a poor experience at times during my undergrad and graduate experience, and really don't think I would be in this field if it weren't for Kevin.
That is awesome. Thank you for sharing.
For me, probably going back to, I believe it was 2017 or 2018, WSU, we put on Northwest NIRSA. So all the Pacific Northwest schools. Allie might have been there, I'm not sure, but I was actually on the planning committee and all of that, and got to present at a few things. And it was definitely really cool to be kind of in the inside and see what it takes to actually put on a conference, even though it's not a huge conference, but it was still fun to see what goes on behind the scenes.
Great. And my best NIRSA moment, I know I shared, with everyone about that coming out moment when I went from the devastated young professional to now NIRSA president, but it was the moment that I walked up on the stage at the closing of LI's annual conference and shared about being the second, Black female president. And, I expected people to clap. I did not expect the standing ovation. And I'm telling you, it brought me to tears. And by far, it's the most magical, is the only word that I can think about, the most magical moment that I've experienced in my career. So by far, extremely powerful. So, but thank you both for taking this opportunity. I really do hope that we've been able to touch multiple people out there by sharing our stories, by sharing our experiences. I think, if I had some final words, it would be really to not be afraid, just don't let this or whatever disability, whatever challenges that you have to navigate, don't prevent that from your dreams. If you set out aspirations, if you say, you want to achieve whatever it is that you may want to achieve, don't be afraid. There's been plenty of times where I could have given up. And that resiliency led me to just unbelievable willpower. And I think sometimes that's what it takes, especially now, especially doing everything that we're having to deal with. I just think that willpower and that determination it will go far. So don't give up. So once again, thank you. Thank you everyone who will be listening on the recording. Enjoy the holidays coming up. Next hit Talents and NIRSA will be after the Christmas break. So we will have episode 4 sometime in the month of January. Until then, enjoy one another, and once again, happy holidays.